Good evening, everybody. The comically oversized Snifter is back, and that is always a good thing. And sliding into view just momentarily, this one, I was looking through the stuff, and when I noticed the date, it had to be done. And I will explain in a moment. We have a gigantic beer. You can see this says 2012, 2013. That was the brewing year that it came out. I'm going to butcher the crap out of this. This is Oude Quetsche Tilquin. Tilquin, maybe. L'Ancien. I got nothing. It is a traditional Belgian Lambic ale brewed with plums. Where's it from? Rebecq-Rognon? In Belgium. It is 6.4%, and this is what I'm talking about. This is the bottle date, the 24th of January, and it's best before the 2023, but they give them 10-year dates, so that means this thing was bottled on this date, the 24th of January in the year 2013. So this is its 13th birthday, and I figure what better way than to talk about, well, as you saw the thumbnail, but we have to wait. It is corked, so give me a moment. I'll be back, and we'll see if this thing is even still good. Okay, we are open, and full disclosure, there was actually still a half-decent amount of carbonation in there. Like, it did not take much to get the cork going. Smells fine. Smells actually kind of fruity and plummy, which is exactly what you want. Oh, I think we might be good. A 13-year-old beer on the day. Shocking amount of carbonation for something this old. But again, I have mentioned that in the past. These beers, they're put in there with the yeast still in there, so much like champagne, they will undergo a secondary fermentation in the bottle. Well, I think we're good, so time to flip. As I clutch my Snifter, I wish I know. It's one of those things, I wish I had a wingback chair. Perhaps even a smoking jacket. We get a little, actually, shockingly, a little bit of plum. And I do have another bottle of this stuff downstairs I found. It was from the year prior, the 2011-2012 growing season. I actually get plums. I get plums in that kind of slight tartness that comes along with this style because it is a wild ale, so there can be wild yeast and bacteria in there. But let's see how this goes. That is very, very nice. That is very nice. Sweet, tart, sour, and then sweet again at the end. Oh, that is just lovely. So now, since we have us a very good beer, and again, happy 13th birthday to this beer, we will drink you in honor. You saw the thumbnail. This is one I think I had heard of in passing, but hadn't thought of in a while. This is, and I can't remember what I've actually titled this. It's either the Lost or the Forgotten State of Franklin, which was looking to be the 14th state back when they were just having the 13 original colonies, so things would have changed. But before we get to that, a little background is necessary. We have to go back to the year 1784. So by the end of the Revolutionary War, the state of North Carolina extended further west than it is now into the Cumberland River Valley. And there was this little sliver that they called the Western Counties. Originally it was land of the Cherokee Nation. Late 1783, early 1784, North Carolina wasn't really sure about having to continue to carry both financially and security-wise of the western counties. So they proposed a land grab. So basically they were going to try to sell off all of that land that was part of their territory, but as the western counties. Only problem with this is these things didn't have a very good history of going smoothly or most times even correctly. So then they decided to switch tactics. They thought because we're just coming out of the Revolutionary War, the U.S. had incurred a very significant amount of debt because of the war. So now they're thinking we can get rid of having to take care of these western and outlying counties, and also we can help offset the debt incurred by the war if they basically ceded or just gave, turned over to the government about 29 million acres back to the U.S. government on the proviso that the U.S. government would have to take control of it within 2 years. And this is, and I'll be putting maps and whatnot up there, it's that little sliver that looks slightly familiar because that part later, it turns into something else, but you'll see that in a moment. But they're basically saying that 29 million acres is all the land in North Carolina from the Appalachian Mountains to the Mississippi River. So that's a pretty hefty chunk. Now, they initially came up with the name of Frank Land. Not Lynn, which is what it became, but Frank Land. And, before we get to that, I'm sorry. We're going to have to take a look. Had it actually become a state, had there actually been the 51st state, or 51 states now, of Franklin included, the boundaries would have included the 12 modern Tennessee, and again, that little sliver of what was then North Carolina but is now Tennessee, would have included the counties of Johnson, Carter, Sullivan, Washington, Greene, Hawkins, Unicoi, Cocke, Hamblin, Jefferson, Sevier, and Blount, with an approximate land area of 6.4 thousand square miles. It would have been the fourth smallest state by area, and about the current population estimates, about 930 to 940,000, meant it would have been the sixth smallest state by population. So, you think about it, it's basically at the time it was 8 counties in far western North Carolina would be the sixth smallest state in terms of population just on those counties. But now, we have to take a look at the beginnings of the state of Franklin. And we'll do that with some of this. It's warming up. It's starting to get a little more of that astringent note, which is fine with beers like this because they're supposed to have that wild yeast. And it's coming through a little more. A little more of the sweetness from the plums is coming up. The one thing I really like about... Ooh, that is tart. Oh, that is so tart and good. But the one thing I really like about it is it leaves like a little plum sweetness on your lips. That's very nice. So now, the date is August the 23rd, 1784. Delegates from the North Carolina, these are the outlying territory, or the outlying counties. The North Carolina counties of Washington, Sullivan, Spencer, and Greene convened in the town of Jonesboro, which, mind you, would become the first capital of the state of Franklin until December of 1785, and then it would be moved to Greenville. But in any way, they declared their land, so those 8 counties, which are now the 12 counties, that little sliver we've seen in the maps, they declared themselves to be independent of the state of North Carolina and put forth a document called the Houston Constitution, which outlined, and this is legitimate, a unicameral legislature, a slew of protections for the freedom of religion, and the requirement that legislation be routinely submitted to the citizens of the state of Franklin for discussion. Novel idea. Wish that could actually be a thing. So now they have essentially declared independence. They even went so far as to elect a government. Though he was a colonel at the time, but would soon get a promotion to brigadier general, John Sevier was elected governor of the state of Franklin, albeit reluctantly. He did not really want to have to deal with that. Ironically, he would go on to become the first governor of Tennessee in 1796. He served from 1796 to 1801, and then again from 1803 to 1809. And then some other people coming in. Landon Carter was named Speaker of the Senate. William Cage, first Speaker of the House of Representatives. And David Campbell, Judge of the Superior Court. They actually went so far as to submit a petition for statehood on May the 16th, 1785. However, the petition failed to meet the minimum required vote. So now, this was all under when they were going to be called Frank Land, L-A-N-D instead of L-I-N. So now they're like, okay, we've just been shot down for our petition for statehood. What can we do? So at this point, they changed the name of Frank Land to Franklin, and then reached out to Benjamin Franklin to see if he would be able to help further their cause. Unfortunately for them, he denied any sort of assistance to the up-and-coming state of Frankland or Franklin. And now, from here on out, now it is officially known as Franklin. But basically, it doesn't matter to them. They have now declared themselves to be an independent area and essentially are operating as a de facto state. They still had, they had their own legislature and whatnot set in place. They used the barter system, which in theory is a good idea. However, the problem with them is they had a lack of hard currency in addition to basically a complete lack of infrastructure, which slowed down the development of any sort of monetary system, and also just confused the crap out of people. I mean, let's be honest. It just made everything so much worse. So people don't know what's going on when it comes to the economy. The one thing they did do was they began making peace treaties with the local native tribes. And that, obviously a very good idea. However, it didn't last long. We're talking from mid-May 1785 to now we're in 1786, so not long after. The decline starts. A lot of people, like the big key prominent residents of the state of Franklin, they were starting to kind of see the writing on the wall, and they started to express a desire to rejoin the state of North Carolina. And the problem now here is because they had declared themselves an independent de facto state, they had no assistance from either the U.S. Federal Army or the North Carolina militias. And then, so now we have, North Carolina realizes what's going on, and they're like, we're going to get these guys back. So in late 1786, North Carolina, the state comes in and offers to the state of Franklin to waive all back taxes if they would simply reunite with the government of North Carolina. It was popularly rejected, however, in 1787, but North Carolina's government sent in troops under the leadership of Colonel John Tipton, and basically they set up their own government and their own economic system, and were working in opposition to the state of Franklin. Now it starts to get even worse. So we're in early 1787, so, it goes through, everything's still starting to decline. But in February of 1788, the North Carolina appointed North Carolina Sheriff of Washington County, Jonathan Pugh, was ordered by North Carolina County Court to seize any property of the governor of Franklin, John Sevier, who I can't pronounce his name. Sevier, Sevier. Sevier, I think it might be. But either way, he wanted to get out of there, and this was his kind of motivation to do it. Basically, it was to seize any of his debts that North Carolina, or any of his property to pay back debts that North Carolina deemed were owed to them. The property seized included several slaves who were brought to Tipton's home and secured in his underground kitchen. On February the 27th, 1788, Governor Sevier arrived at the Tipton house leading a force numbering more than 100 men. We have escalated, ladies and folks. And then, coming back. During a heavy snowstorm in the early morning of February the 29th, let's go leap year, Colonel George Maxwell then arrived with a force equivalent to Sevier's to reinforce Tipton. It was a very quick skirmish, lasted approximately 10 minutes. Sevier and his force withdrew to Jonesboro, and a number of men were captured or wounded on both sides, and all in all, 3 men lost their lives in, what was it called? I think it was called the Franklin Skirmish or something like that. Coming back. And now, not long after, we're looking the following month. Actually, we're going to take a pause because I realize we're nearing the end of this interesting tale, and we're going to have us another sip of the... I wish I took French. I took Spanish in high school. Quetsche Tilquin? I don't know. The Q's confound me as an American. What can I say? But all I know what doesn't confound me is how tasty this thing really is. Yeah, that tart, starting to get a little more bitey. And the salivary glands are starting to go. I really, really, really like that. Man, I am so glad that held up well, and I'm glad I have another bottle of it. Like I said, that is a year older, so I'll have to check when that thing's birthday is and be coming back with that. So now we come to essentially the end of the state of Franklin, and March of 1788. The Chickamauga, the Chickasaw, and other native tribes launched all-out attacks on various settlements all throughout the state of Franklin. The North Carolina militia was forced to step in and drive up the tribes, and and at that point, the majority of Franklin said, you know what, we're going back to North Carolina. Like I said, there was a little small enclave in the Southwest Territory they called Lesser Franklin, but by early 1789, Franklin's government was gone. They had gone back to North Carolina, and all that remained was this tiny little sliver. And essentially that collapsed in 1791, thus ending the 7-year experiment of the almost 14th state of the United States. This was such an interesting thing. Like, I could have sworn, like I said, I'd heard about this in passing. But to give you the details, I really couldn't. So when I was looking at a list of different odd things in American history, I found this one. I think this one was part of the stuff that's not talked about very often. And, you know, I can see why, but at the same time I can't, because this is really interesting stuff. Oh, and actually, bonus fun fact. Actually, there's one more fact. So 1791, Lesser Franklin collapses and rejoins North Carolina. And they remained North Carolina until the year 1796, when Tennessee became a state, and that little sliver that we all know as Tennessee now which was at one point the state of Franklin, became part of what is now Tennessee. But again, bonus fun fact, a very well-known and important historical figure is, as they called, a Franklinite, Davy Crockett, who was born August the 17th, 1786, in Greene County, the state of Franklin. And I think that is actually how his birthplace is officially acknowledged, because at that time they were a de facto state. So if you look up Davy Crockett, fairly positive it'll say Greene County, Franklin, you know, modern day whatever county, Tennessee. And I just think stuff like that is really cool. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, would it have had any sort of long-term impact? I honestly don't believe it would have. I think if they would have been granted statehood, I don't really think much, if anything, would have changed other than the maps, the flag, and what we were taught in high school. Like, it's one of those things you don't really see any positive benefit from it, but at the same time, there's also no negative effects of it existing. It's kind of fascinating. 7 years, and they almost became a state. Really makes you wonder what if they would have, remained an independent state, almost country at this point, right in the middle of North Carolina and Tennessee on, near the eastern seaboard of the United States. There's a whole lot of variously cool things. And that's why I've always said that I think that's what drew me to history and the social sciences more than the natural sciences. Because if you look at things like math, hold on, I need a sip. I just smelled it. It's like, oh, I need to sip this. Oh, that is quite lovely. But, like, you look at math, let's say, It's very rigid, it's very structured, and like, here's the answer. Plain and simple. It's not up for interpretation. Whereas a historical event, you could take 10 people, ask them about the same event, and potentially get 10 different interpretations of it, and quite possibly none of them could be incorrect. And I think that's why I love it. But at the same time, I think that's why a lot of people don't love it, because it is so open-ended and it's not structured. And unfortunately, as has been the case with many things I've talked about, I mean, not in the, specific history per se, but like in the realm of history lessons, like there's some things that we will never find out the answer to. And that is slightly infuriating. But at least for tonight, the one thing we can lay our heads down on our pillows and be thankful for is that we now know the reason and the reason for the demise of the forgotten / I think I actually called it the lost state of Franklin in the United States. I love doing this stuff because I'm finding out all kinds of really cool stuff, and I'm being able to talk to you about it. It's a win-win for me, and I think it's a win-win for everybody. So we are going to raise our glasses one final time. This is from the French-speaking part of Belgium, so I say unto you, à ta santé, as they would say in the French language. Yeah, I am going to enjoy the rest of that, I'll tell you that for free. But I'm going to leave you with this final parting thought and bid you a farewell, and have a great rest of your weekend. If you think about it, brushing your teeth is the closest we will ever get to cleaning our skeleton. Have a good night, everybody.